Hello, everyone. I'm Teos Abadia, and I'm here to share with you some monster powers. And monster powers are something that is in the Forge of Foes Kickstarter, which is what you see on that big window over there. And I am super excited about this. This is a book that I helped write with Mike Shea and Scott Fitzgerald Gray, packed full of really cool ideas for how you can customize your monsters and your encounters and take different approaches to using monsters, to engaging your players. A lot of fun stuff. And there is incredible uh, like suggestions and advice for how to modify your game in different ways that I'm really excited for everybody to use. Question that came up from someone was, can this be used in games other than 5th edition? And absolutely, a lot of this really translates. Like while we talk about the underpinnings of 5e, the lessons here are lessons that we've been developing throughout lots of different RPGs, not just even different editions of D&D. But this is a 5e book. The tool part of it is focused on that, though I'm going to show you how monster powers can actually be used in other systems. So I think this is well worth it for any of it. I am so amazed by how this has done. Thank you to everybody supporting this. Really, really, really super awesome. We're at like about $130,000 with 25 days to go and 3,200 backers. But if you haven't backed it, we would love for you to back it. And the reason is that folks backing this are helping us make this book be successful. And that results in our being able to go on to the next project faster and sooner. I have to fit this into my daily life. But when cool things like this happen, I can accelerate how much I can do on projects that are for D&D or for RPGs. So monster powers. This is something I've been working on for a bunch of years, and really like the 3 last years, and looking at really the best ways that you could do any of the following things. Bolster a weak monster. And this includes things like normalizing the math, right? So that if you're kind of going to miss one round, maybe hit the next, that you could have more chances to hit because you're doing things off turn or several times per turn. And so you are more able to know that the monster is dependable. Or giving the weak monster options, so you know that not only can they maybe engage in melee, but they have a really neat ranged attack. Or they have something that's AoE around them that can really give you those options to make them more compatible with whatever the players might throw at you. Or maybe you're straight up boosting damage, right? Or creating new tactics so that that weak monster is really strong in different ways. So one way is that bolster a weak monster. Another is to add engagement to a monster. This is the idea that the monster is going to get the players to take notice, right? The players and their characters are going to go, oh, wait, what's going on? I've got to be paying attention, right? The creature swallows you, right? So being able to add the ability of a monster to swallow one of the characters, that makes the characters go, uh-oh, what do we do, right? The cleric's inside the gut of this monster. What do we do? Or maybe the monster swallows one of its allies and gets a really big benefit from it. And so now we might say, wait a minute, we don't want that to keep happening. Let's wipe out all the minions, right? Or it could be the other way around, something that makes us say, let's ignore the minions, focus on the big boss. So that adds engagement as the players think through how to handle a monster because this monster is cool and interesting through these monster powers. Number 3, transform a monster. So we've got a monster and we say, cool, but I want to make this an undead version. Or I want to make this monster be empowered by the power of ice or of fire, or it is tied to the earth in some way. And fourth and last, I might want to just build a monster. And so I want to have the ability to drop in a building block that helps me make a monster into what I want it to be, right? So those are 4 things: bolster a weak monster, add engagement, transform, or build a monster from new. And if you go to our Kickstarter page right now, you can download for free the preview. And this includes our quick build rules, which allow you to put together quickly a monster of any CR. And then to it, if you want to, you can add powers that reinforce the type of creature it is, like that it's an ooze, or it's a giant, or made of clockwork. And we'll use some of those powers and examples here so you can take a look at that. And in fact, coming to examples, you're seeing on your screen the ogre, which is a bit boring, right? And the ogre is actually something that someone asked about when we were doing a stream to celebrate on the Sly Flourish Discord's channel. We were celebrating going live with the Kickstarter. Someone said, how would you make an ogre interesting, right? Well, so let's look at this ogre. It's got a bunch of hit points for its CR. It's really easy to hit with a low armor class. And then it just has this great club and a javelin to give it a little ranged something. But it's really about taking a big hit with that great club. So what can we do? Well, we can do a number of things for an ogre that are kind of fun. And here I've sort of chopped up that stat block to just chuck in Forceful Blow as a reaction. And I could also put this down below. It's sort of in the train spot, so I guess really should go down below. But the Forceful Blow is a reaction with recharge 4 to 6. And when this creature, the ogre, hits a target with a weapon attack, we roll 1d4 plus 1, and the target is pushed 5 times that many feet away from this creature. So somewhere between 5 and 20 feet away from it. And what that lets us do is convey the idea that this ogre is large and it's hugely strong, right? It's got this massive ability to hit with this great club. And we haven't really changed the damage here, but we've changed the engagement of it because it just chucks the characters away from it, which wakes everybody up. It's kind of cool. Like, oh man, that threw me back. And it doesn't hugely affect the power of it by default, but we could, right? What if we add a pit to the room, right? Or we're fighting on the edge of a cliff. Suddenly this Forceful Blow becomes a big deal. We probably want to give characters the chance to grab onto the edge. But you know, this suddenly becomes a really big tactical thing that everybody, again, sits up on the edge of their seat and goes, that is serious. I really, really care about this. And that Forceful Blow power is one of the ones that comes from the Giant series, right? So it's perfect for a creature like an ogre, conveys that size. Another one we could do is we could take out, Forceful Blow, and we can instead add as an action Shove Allies. And what Shove Allies does is it lets the ogre shove any adjacent allied creatures that are smaller in size than it, so medium or small or tiny, and the shoved ally moves up to 15 feet away from that foe and can then make a melee weapon attack if they end that movement and there's a creature within reach. What's that mean? It means that you surround the ogre with goblins or something else small like that, and they can shove any number of those allied creatures at the characters, and then those things make attacks, right? And it's hilarious, right? It's like, go take care of them, and it just shoves these goblins that go flying towards all the characters, and the characters, are being attacked by these little goblins that are attacking as sort of free attacks instead of the ogre's attack. And that's a great way that you can take what could be a little lame. The ogre is just great clubbing every single round, but not this round. This round, it shoves all of its goblin allies in everyone's faces and changes the dynamic of things because now, maybe, and this could be a neat opening move, right? Because it sort of engages characters in different spots of the map than they may want to be relative to the ogre. So that's a good example of this Shove Allies attack. Another one that I love using this power all the time. Like this is a thing I improvise when DMing. So I'm giving away one of my DM secrets. I was at Winter Fantasy and the characters were really having an easy time. And I immediately added this power to my creature because I knew that this would wake everybody up. And in fact, it did. They were surprised by it. Retaliation. When an attack roll hits this creature, they may make an opportunity attack against the creature that made the attack roll. You hit me, I hit you back. And that's another way that this great club becomes more interesting because suddenly the ogre becomes not as dull-witted and simple as it was before, because this time when you hit it, it takes a swing right back at you, right? And the player behind that character kind of goes, whoa, okay, I didn't expect that. And that could be a big amount of damage if you hit off turn, and that hit on turn, that could be really a huge damage spike coming from this, right? Free source of damage. This is set to reaction, but you could easily make it just be once an encounter, or you can make it be on a recharge, right? Very simply. So, but for other creatures relative to their CR, having this be a reaction that always happens is perfect and works really well. And again, gets those players awake. Let's stay in the fire giant category, similar to how the question came in from the listener. Fire giant. Fire giants are another of those things that I think in my brain, they are so cool, right? But how they're set up is a little simple. I make 2 greatsword attacks. And if you're far away from me and I can't attack with my greatsword, I can chuck a rock at you, but just 1 rock. Fine, but we can do a number of things to make it interesting. So one thing is fire giants are often shown as being sort of militaristic, right? So I can take that fire giant and I can make it a commander by giving it this trait that we have, the commander trait. While this creature has more than half of its maximum hit points remaining, which it has a pile of hit points and also a high armor class, allies within 30 feet gain a +2 bonus to attack and damage rolls. So now this is a way that tactically, and what we'd want to do is we'd want to, and there's advice in the book for using these monster powers, right? So the advice in the book tells you, hey, when you use a power like this, let the characters know, let the players know, right? When you see this giant constantly yelling commands and everybody around it, all the other creatures in the encounter, they are empowered by this commander, by the fire giant commander, right? You make that clear to the players. So the players are going, oh, this thing is boosting them, making them stronger. What do? Do we take down this big, hard to take down fire giant? Or we take down these other things that are around it, serving it? Because those things are kind of dangerous through the empowered nature. Which do we do, right? And that creates a tactical decision that's kind of fun. So that's the commander trait, really cool. And some of these, by the way, you will find in the preview. Some of them are from the part that we haven't shared yet, so you're getting a little bit of a sneak peek here. Here's another one, very simple. You know, fire giants, they're from the Forge, so it's totally possible for them to have a flaming weapon, and they are immune to fire damage. So the flaming weapon, the first time in a round that you hit with your weapon attack power, which you've got a greatsword, it deals an additional damage equal to 4 plus CR. So in this case, it'd be 13 points of fire damage, and the target's armor or skin begins to smolder. While smoldering, you are now vulnerable to fire damage, and you can make a fairly simple, fairly standard constitution check at the end of your turn if you're affected by the smoldering to end the smoldering effect. So we are lighting people on fire and making them vulnerable to fire damage as part of that concept, right? So that's really cool. And that puts the fear into coming up and fighting this fire giant. Really awesome power. Here's another one that actually comes from the idea of clockwork creatures called armor plating. And I'm a fan of this. I've used this in a number of cases. A lot of these powers come from things that I have playtested extensively over the last few years. So armor plating is one that I really like, and I play with this one in a number of ways. And I should say that all of these monster powers, the idea behind them is not, hey, you've got to use this exact wording. We like the wording. We worked hard on the wording, but the wording is there as a starting point, right? This is meant, like the rest of the book, to be a guide and a tool that you shape. So armor plating, what it does is it boosts the armor class by +2. So we've got an armor class of 18, really good. Plate mail armor on a fire giant, and a bunch of hit points. But now, each time that your hit points are reduced by 1/4 of your maximum value, this boost of +2, so you start at 20, it will go down by 1, and then it keeps going down. So eventually you'll be a 16. So it creates a really different cadence to the encounter where the fire giant starts really hard to hit, but as you finally tear into it, it becomes easier and easier. And this is a nice default, the way that we've written this power up, but it's also worth considering it, making it more, a stronger, bigger swing. So for example, you could give it the +2 to armor class, but then drop it by 2 when you hit each time. So it actually ends up worse overall, but accelerates that combat. So it's a slow start to the combat. That's going to let the fire giant get in more hits. And you can describe this thing like as you actually land a blow, a chunk of this special plate armor that it is forged starts falling off, right? And eventually it's not wearing armor, and now you can tear, the armor has big gaps in it that the characters can hit through, and you can describe how that's happening when they're landing blows once the armor class is reduced below it's boosted and even below its normal state, right? So maybe the end armor class is 14, right? Really easy to hit fire giant because of these big holes in the armor that have finally been torn asunder. So this is the example of kind of the fun ideas that hopefully we enable with these different monster powers. Let's take another example. Here we're going to look at the skeleton. Skeletons are fun, creepy concepts, right? Think of any movie with skeletons. They're so cool. But in D&D, we kind of get a little tired of them after a while, right? Because yeah, it's a skeleton, and we don't really think in our minds as players of what it means to have this skeletal undead coming after you, wanting to rend you. So when we use monster powers, we change the nature of this skeleton to make it a little more interesting, right? So here we've got one that's pretty good. This is a trait, Stench of Death. Any creature who starts their turn within 10 feet of the skeleton has to succeed on a Constitution saving throw or become poisoned until the start of their next turn. And then you're immune to it if you succeed on that save. So, in this case, and we tell you to boost to round up. So in this case, you'd be at a DC 11. So it's fairly easy. But with a bunch of skeletons around that are all in this sort of decomposing state, right? They're just past the zombie stage, I guess. Then that becomes another interesting aspect to it that reinforces its undead nature and makes the players maybe react, role play, right? Think through things. We can use monster powers to do a totally different thing, right? This is the Stench of Death, embrace the undead nature. Well, now we can go with elemental attacks. So it's the same stat block, but that damage it's doing is not piercing. It's acid because it came out of an acid vat, or it is bludgeoning because it's kind of encased in rock, or it is cold damage because it's covered in frost, right? That kind of thing. Lightning damage because they're imbued with lightning and glow. Their eyes glow with eldritch fire. These are fun things you can do to change up those skeletons, make them fit this mood. And this is a monster power that can be added to any monster to do that, right? Going with that elemental theme, this is one I like a lot, Armor of Frost. And it's a reaction for the creature, and to represent the idea that the cold is sort of rebuilding around it, right? So you describe the skeleton as being sort of wreathed in frost. And the first time a character attacks it, the skeleton spends its reaction, and the attacking creature takes 4 plus CR, so in this case 5 cold damage, we round up, and its speed is halved until the end of its next turn, right? So it's that idea of this cold seeping into you and causing damage, and you can explain how some of it seems to sort of dissipate momentarily as it kind of feeds into you. So other characters will know that the cold, isn't going to hit them, isn't going to affect them if they make attacks now. But that first person did, and that's that capturing that angle that it's a reaction, right? That can be fun to describe it that way, sort of, and then we can describe how the frost builds back up, right? This next one is something that I really love using on monsters. You can't use it all the time, but when you do it, it's just such a cool idea. So let's think about these skeletons and the idea that they have been, maybe they were victims to an artificer's laboratory experiment, and they're covered in some sort of glue, or they are covered in an ooze, right? And we can give them this trait, which comes from the idea of sort of ooze-like creatures, adhesive skin. So this trait says that when this creature is hit by a melee weapon attack, the weapon becomes stuck to it. So you go to shatter the skeleton, and you might hit and deal damage, but now your weapon is stuck to it. And you can have to spend an action to remove this weapon, or make a successful athletics check to remove it. And that item stuck to this creature until it dies. So if you do kill it, then it's fine. You get to hold on your weapon. Or if you kill it with your other weapon that you have to now pull out, right? It does this. And this creates interest, right? Because the players are sort of so used to having the weapon, it's just the same weapon and attack. Well, what do you do when it got stuck to someone? I guess I got to pull out that backup weapon, or maybe I have to punch it, right? They're just skeletons, so it's not the end of the world, but this can be a really fun thing for low-level characters or even high-level characters to deal with and be really surprised by this adhesive skin. And I'll just do a couple more here. So this is keeping with that undead theme. If we have a Wraith, which is a CR5, so it's a pretty strong creature to attack, and we may want to give it a little stronger flavor and really make that Wraith maybe into a major villain, right? Or like a boss in a particular encounter, right? It is not just a Wraith; it's the Wraith that is empowering all of the trouble in this tower or in this section of the dungeon or whatever it is. So we can give it some monster powers to really highlight its nature and how awesome it is. 2 that I love, Aura of Demise. This is a trait where enemies within 30 feet of this creature who attempt a death saving throw do so with disadvantage. Now, that's cool. It certainly makes you scared when you have to roll death saving throws, but that doesn't happen that often unless we use the next trait. We wouldn't do that, would we? Which is Aura of Destruction. Creatures ending their turn adjacent to this creature, at CR is above 12, it's a little further out, you must make a death saving throw, regardless of your current hit point total. So if you're fighting the Wraith and you're near it, in its Aura of Destruction, at the end of your turn, you must make a death saving throw. And if it has Aura of Demise, you are doing it at disadvantage. 3 successful saves means you're immune to this thing. 3 failures reduces you to 0 hit points. Right? So this becomes, and then of course, you are now at 0 hit points. You would be making death saving throws to see if you actually die. So these two can really, really make an encounter very different, where everybody who's in melee with it or who is approached by the Wraith really has to think about what they're going to do tactically. I love those. Those come from one of my friends, Chad Brown, who kind of came up with this concept once in a Dark Sun Ashes of Athas adventure. And this is my 5e version of it. Another neat power to convey an undead nature is Withering Blow. This is an action on a recharge. You make this attack as part of this. You make an attack as part of this action, and that can include multi-attack. So really, it rides on another action. So we can, for example, use the Life Drain action of the Wraith and add Withering Blow to it. Right? We make that attack, the Life Drain attack, as part of this action. If at least one attack hits, the target additionally takes 5 plus CR, so in this case 10 necrotic damage, at the start of each of its turns. You can make a saving throw at the end of your turns to try to end that effect. And that becomes just a really neat, it's a little bit of additional damage that carries a strong role-playing component, right? The idea that this Wraith is not just draining life from you, but leaving this lingering, withering effect inside of the character, right? And that is something cool to describe. And that's really what these monster powers are about. One of the big parts of them is to add that flavor and transform the nature of this story so that the encounter is much more engaging, much more interesting to the players. So I had mentioned other games, right? So let's talk about Fate, for example. Fate is an example of a system with really simple monsters, right? So here are 2 simple monsters, Cyclops House Bully and a Steel Assassin. And, they would just attack normally. And we could use that armor plating trait that we described for the Fire Giant. We could use that with the Cyclops House Bully and really dig into the concept that maybe this bully, this kind of thug-like guy, has covered themselves in some sort of temporary armor, right? Is maybe it's an old football outfit, or depending on the type of campaign, it could be some sort of put together droid parts or whatever, but it's clearly kind of put together protecting them. And what that might mean is we need to hit this twice before we can get to them, because otherwise this thing with one hit goes down, right? This creature, but it could get an extra 2 hits worth of attacks because of the armor plating it has. So we can marry the concept that is really written for D&D 5e to something as wild as Fate, right? And Fate tends to have things where you have aspects or you have stunts. And so we can make a lot of these things work as stunts as well. We could make armor plating an asset instead if we wanted to, or we could give powers that feel like a stunt. Here's an example of the Steel Assassin, which is sneaking and ambushing around. That's what it's skilled at. We could give it Teleporting Step, which allows it to teleport a number of feet equal to their speed to an unoccupied space they can see. That is awesome in 5e. In Fate, we can say that just teleports them out of this zone into another zone, right? That can be really neat. Or for this creature, or for something in Night's Black Agents. So Night's Black Agents has a lot of vampires, and the vampires you get to customize with really cool powers. So we could say, hey, let's give a vampire, or let's even give in Fate the Steel Assassin, the Hit and Run action. Hit and Run says, as part of this action, this creature first takes one of their other actions. After it completes, they can move 30 feet without provoking opportunity attacks, and if they're behind cover, they can hide. So this lets a vampire in Night's Black Agents bite you and then fade into darkness, right? Or hide behind the crates or anything like that. And same thing with the Steel Assassin. It could take an attack and it could then hide behind some cover. And even though it's talking about things like dexterity stealth checks, sure, that's D&D 5e, we can easily transport that to any other setting. And let's talk about the kind of guidelines for how you do this. So if you take any of these monster powers, some of them, they will really work very easily, right? The idea of teleporting your speed, you just can say, well, about this far is how it would move. That's where it can teleport to. It's very easy. But in general, we can do three things. We look at the stat block and we assess kind of how strong or weak it is. And then we can say, okay, the power that I'm adding either should be as strong as what it already does, because I'm just giving it this extra option, or it should be a little stronger, a little weaker. And then the third step is to just put that block in and convert it by saying, hey, this power is supposed to say deal damage. I'm going to deal damage that's about half what it usually does, because this is like extra damage. Or this is a full action, and I want it to be something that people really notice, so I'm going to double the damage it would normally do, right? Or add half more of the damage I'm going to do. And those are the steps I really go to, right? Just take a look at your stat block, think through whether you want it to be weaker or stronger than what it already does, and then apply that conversion to what it does. I had fun on Twitter with Shadow Dark, which is doing super well by the Arcane Library as a Kickstarter. This is an example from their preview file of a troll. And the troll is really cool. It has, claw attacks and it has regeneration. You could give forceful blow to the troll so that when it hits, it just sends them flying. And there's really no real conversion that you need here, right? You use the recharge rules. We know what those are. Roll a d6, start of the turn, see if you get 4 to 6, you get it back. And otherwise, it's just roll a d4 and it's sending the foes far away from you, right? So very easy to translate it across. So I hope that's helpful for everyone to kind of think through the Forge of Foes. Thank you again for all of your support. It just means so much to us, truly, to see the support that you have given us. We hope that these monster powers can really make a big difference in your game, helping you transform, any creature from just a basic version that's just fun on its own into something that's really, really different, right? That has neat powers that tell a story and that fit the type of encounter that you were really thinking of. So thanks again. Really appreciate it. And if you want to see something else previewed, want to hear me talk about one of the topics in the book, or showcase different types of monster powers, or answer questions, let us know. We'd be glad to cover it in a video. Thanks, and thank you for backing the Lazy DM's Forge of Foes.